This is the Building Automation Monthly Podcast with Phil Zito, episode 153. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 153 of the Building Automation Monthly Podcast. And in this episode, we are going to be discussing 3 ways to get a job in building automation. Now, I've been experiencing kind of an interesting trend lately. I've had these folks reaching out to me, and it's almost on a near daily basis now via LinkedIn and Facebook. And they're asking me, how do I get in to building automation? How do I get a job in the field of building automation? And if I'm honest with you, I feel like honestly a little guilty about this, because here's a little thing about myself is that when I start to get overwhelmed, like when I start to have folks sending me tons and tons of emails and I can't keep up with it and I'm not responding, I tend to just pull back. I tend to just shut down. And I really feel bad about this, just not answering and not helping every single person. And so because I feel that way, because I feel like, man, I can't answer every single person, I just end up not responding to people. And I mean, that's my own personal issue. But, over the weekend, I started to think, you know what, Phil? You've got a podcast. You've got a lot of people who listen to this every day. Why don't you just go and answer this in a podcast episode? So this week, I was going to be discussing kind of how to grow your business around systems integration. This was going to be the business day today, but fortunately, this is my podcast, so I can do whatever the heck I want. So today, I'm actually going to just have a, deep from the heart conversation with you about how to get into building automation systems. I was a little apprehensive to do this because I know I've got just this wide audience, and some of you are already in BAS and you're like, why do I need to get a job? Well, if that's you, I don't want you to tune out, because one of the biggest challenges for a lot of folks right now is, where do I find talent? How do I find it, and how do I hire it? What am I looking for? And I want you to come away from this episode, if you already have a role in BAS, is where you can find more people who want to work in BAS. Because this is an awesome field. It really is. It provides some awesome opportunities, and I want you to know other places, maybe some non-traditional places that you can look at to find talent, because definitely my story is not traditional. Now, before we get started, today's podcast is sponsored by our Building Automation Systems A to Z program. So if you are brand new to BAS, or if you just are looking to grow in your knowledge of BAS and you're looking for that kind of 30,000 foot guide to everything building automation, then Building Automation Systems A to Z is for you. Go to Building Automation Monthly /153, scroll down to the Building Automation Systems A to Z logo, click on that, and pick up your copy of the program today. So how do you get started in BAS? Well, as I see it from my experience, there are really 3 groups of people who can fill BAS jobs, and those are tradespeople. We're talking about mechanics, electricians, commissioning agents, test and balance folks. There's IT folks who have networking or server or database backgrounds. And then the general population, which actually is kind of the pool that I came from. I came from the general population. I wasn't a tradesperson. I wasn't an IT person. I actually had no business being in building automation. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, this may be a longer podcast. I'm really not sure on this. I've got a lot of show notes here to cover, but it may end up being long. It may end up being short. I'm not sure, but I'm telling you, you're going to want to hear all of it. I'm going to go through the strengths and weaknesses and strategies for getting hired for each group. I'm going to tell you stories of students we've had and how they've gone about getting hired. I'm not going to use their names because I didn't ask them for permission to use their names, but I will tell you their story of how they got hired. Now, a little bit about my story. And before I tell you this, I just want to preface. The reality is I've got an impressive story. I always feel uncomfortable telling folks this, but I'm not just going to try to be falsely humble. Making $100,000 a year by your second year in BAS is pretty impressive. I mean, a lot of folks would want to do that. The thing is, where I always hesitate telling folks that is because I feel like folks think they can't do that. But here's the reality. The majority of you listening to me right now are way further advanced than I ever was when I started in the field. I mean, look, the reality is I got my first job because I memorized the Wikipedia page on HVAC and BAS enough to pass my first job interview. I mean, I've said this multiple times on the podcast before. I literally got hired because I memorized Wikipedia and then got sent out to program stuff and had no freaking clue what I was doing. I mean, the only reason I'm where I am today is because I've worked my butt off. I mean, I spent several hours each night studying. But, you know, a lot of people don't see that hard work. They see Phil Zito, the podcaster. They don't see Phil Zito, the guy who went to Toastmasters, which is a public speaking group. Because I used to like sweat like crazy just speaking in front of a group of 6 people. And I would break out. It was like raining. I mean, it was embarrassing. I remember this one time I was speaking at a hotel and I was like dripping sweat. I was so embarrassed and uncomfortable. And then to make it worse, I go, man, it's crazy hot in here. You guys should really get a mechanic to come out and look at your air conditioning. Little did I know the air conditioning was actually down at the hotel, and the company I was working at was actually the company responsible for maintaining the hotel, and they couldn't get people out of there. Needless to say, that was pretty embarrassing. Folks didn't see me blowing up controllers because I didn't understand how to terminate power properly, or wiping out entire LAN databases because I didn't know what I was doing with that. Folks see the Phil Zito who teaches courses, who runs podcasts, who's written a book on BAS, who's very knowledgeable on stuff. But all of that came from tons of hard work. And each one of you listening right now are in a much better place than I ever was. You're capable of so much more than you think is possible. I'm telling you, when you listen to this episode, I want you to think about whether you are trying to get a job or you're trying to advance, or maybe you're trying to grow a team. I mean, how could you aggressively apply yourself and grow? Because each one of you has the complete capability to be so much further along. To give you an example, right? And just show you how the trick is not that you have to be smarter than anyone else. You just have to work harder. And let me give you an example. So something I do behind the scenes, I don't really talk about this much, so please don't reach out to me and be like, Phil, mentor me. But I take calls from people who they're never going to, and they've never done, or they've never purchased my courses. They're probably never going to purchase my courses. But I take phone calls with them. I talk from like 30 minutes. I tell them exactly what they need to do to get promoted or to get hired. And the reality is, following up on these folks, only about 2 out of every 10, so 20% of these people actually do what I tell them. Majority of them don't do anything. A couple of them maybe try a little bit. See, the thing is, whether you're getting hired, whether you're getting promoted, whether you're growing a team, whether you're launching a product, you just have to outwork everyone else. People are naturally just going to drop like flies once it gets hard. And as long as you keep working, as long as you keep outworking the people to your left and to your right, eventually they are going to quit and you are going to win. You know, no one ever said I could write a book or create courses. And honestly, some of the stuff I've created, you've never even heard of it because it was that bad. But I didn't quit. I outworked everyone else. And you are human. Therefore, barring any physical or mental deformities, you are capable of anything any other human is capable of. You just have to outwork folks. All right. So enough of Tony Robbins' motivational Phil Zito. Let's actually dive in. I just felt really strongly that I needed to tell you all that message today. It's all about hard work. So let's dive in. So, you know, when you really think about a career in building automation, when you think about, you know, an entry-level role, I mean, it's really not that hard. You need to be able to read a schematic And then working alongside a subcontractor or doing it yourself, you need to be able to terminate some wires, start up a controller, upload and download programs, which, by the way, they're going to teach you in the manufacturer training. And then maybe set up some front ends. I mean, for the majority of you, that is going to be what you do in your first BAS role. You're going to read a schematic, you're going to terminate some wires, you're going to upload and download programs, maybe do some point-to-point checkout, and set up some front ends. So for those of you who are like, I don't know how to use a computer, I don't know HVAC, blah, 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 blah. It's really not that hard of a role. I don't mean to disparage any of you who are maybe challenged by your initial BAS roles. I mean, not every role is the same. Honestly, my first BAS role, they asked me to go out and program a central plant. So yeah, some of you run into some really hard stuff up front. But for most of you, it's fairly simple tasks. And I think you overthink it, and that keeps you from taking action. One of my blessings is that I've been too stupid to know I couldn't do things. I would go and take on things that I was in no way skilled enough or talented or capable enough of doing, and I would just do it because I didn't know any better. A lot of you get caught up in your heads and you don't take action. All right, so let's talk about the first group, and that's tradespeople, the people who I think have the easiest way of transitioning in, but yet when I talk to them, they seem to talk like it's the hardest to transition in. I really think that difficulty of transitioning is coming from the folks who are maybe 10, 20 years in, and it comes down to one thing, and that is money. The reality is that for a lot of you who are working in the trade right now as mechanics, electricians, commissioning agents, test and balance, you're maybe making $40,000 to $100,000 a year. I mean, it's all over the spectrum, right? So you're making, depending on your geography, a fair bit of money. Then you want to move into BAS. Maybe the work's too hard. Maybe you just want something more challenging. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm 40. I don't want to be lugging compressors up a ladder on my back anymore. So you decide, I'm going to move into BAS. Problem is, folks will tell you got to take a pay cut. Now, we're going to do some strategies here that are going to keep you most likely from taking a pay cut, at least keep you at parity pay-wise. But let's first talk through the pros and cons. So for those of you who are hiring and those of you who are just looking to move into BAS, what are the pros of a tradesperson? Well, they already understand the contracting environment. And this is huge. I mean, this is one of the hardest things for anyone. I would argue that learning the HVAC side, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's all about heat transfer and airflow. But understanding the contracting environment, understanding all the nuances of a project, that is something that tradespeople have down. They understand how to work within those contexts. Let me take a sip of water real quick. 1 second. Here we go. You gotta love winters. It's super dry and you talk and it just dries your throat out. As I was saying, tradespeople, right? They already understand the contracting environment, and that is their biggest strength. A lot of folks would think, oh, but Phil, their biggest strength is they know HVAC or they know electrical or no, the biggest strength is that they understand contracting. Now, granted, from a service perspective, understanding HVAC may be valuable, but I do not recommend that folks start off their BAS career in service. I recommend you start off your BAS career in construction, which is a little more structured, and it's a better environment, in my opinion, to learn BAS fundamentals. So you're a tradesperson. Biggest thing you got to get over is, right, you got to get over the fact that you're going to have a salary differential. Like I said, I'm going to teach you strategies to avoid that. But also realize that the biggest benefit is the contracting skills. Actually, the strongest con to hiring tradespeople is the fact that they understand the systems. The fact that these folks understand HVAC or understand electrical or understand test and balance can actually go and keep them so focused on the area of their strength that, especially when they move into service, I've seen mechanics working on HVAC equipment, trying to figure out why it wouldn't turn on, not to take the time to go and actually check the electrical circuitry and the safeties to figure out, oh, hey, this is tripped and that's why it's not running, because they were so focused on the mechanical side of things. And likewise, vice versa on electrical and on test and balance. I've seen folks who were so focused on, hey, I'm not getting the CFM I'm getting here, but they didn't think through the actual reason why they weren't getting the CFM. This is not to say that all mechanics and test and balance folks and electricians are going to hyper-focus on their specialties. However, I've seen it happen a lot. So what are these strategies to get hired but not take a pay cut? Well, the easiest one is to get hired in as a mechanic or an electrician or whatever to a company that actually has a BAS practice, and then do a lateral transfer into the BAS. Now, that's a direct lateral transfer. It's a little more difficult, but it can be done. The other way is to get hired to a BAS company or a company that has a BAS division, and then do a gradual transition. This is over the period of a year or two, where you gradually take on more controls work. Oh, you're at a small project that also has some controls? Well, volunteer to do the controls as well as the mechanical systems, or as well as the electrical systems. This gives you gradual experience. It's not as fast, but once again, you can do a transition where you stay most likely at the same pay rate. The other option is to be tolerant of a pay cut, do a lot of work after hours, and aggressively apply to BAS positions, and then aggressively reapply once you've done your time in those positions to work your way up to that salary you were at before. This can be done, especially in today's market, because they are so hungry for people who understand BAS. Now, the next group, and this is an emerging group that I believe is really under-tapped and underutilized, especially with the trends that we're seeing within the building automation space. What are those trends? We're seeing more cloud compute. We're seeing more virtualized environments. We're seeing IP controls with different network requirements. We're seeing a greater rise in integration by default. Folks are expecting things to get integrated. We're also seeing that folks are looking for recurrable revenue sources, some of which are best achieved by things like remote operation centers, remote monitoring, going and doing analytics, etc. So you're looking at these things, right? You're looking at these technology skills that are the future of our industry. Okay, so you've got these skills, but then who's actually going to do these skills? And that's where IT folks come in. The pros are IT folks can talk to other IT folks. It's a definite pro. We all have horror stories about trying to work with the customer's IT environment or IT department and not being able to get things done. We all know how that can delay projects, especially the more complex projects. We also know how many times, and let's be honest, if you've been in this trade for any amount of time, how many times we've spent hours and sometimes days trying to get that server to work, trying to get that database to work, trying to get that connection to work, trying to troubleshoot that network connectivity. Why is that port down? Why is our bandwidth constrained, et cetera, et cetera. IT folks, on average, can do this stuff in their sleep because they've spent years doing it. It's very natural to them. So going and understanding IT is an extremely valuable skill set. Now here's the cons. For one, there is a misconception, and I argue this is a misconception, because just like if you have the technical capabilities to understand electrical and mechanical systems, you have the technical acumen, you have the intelligence to learn IT. If you have the technical capabilities to learn IT, you have the technical capabilities to learn mechanical systems. However, there's this perception that if you're an IT person, you can't understand mechanical systems. What in reality is the case, and I've seen this teaching our control sequences fundamentals course, which basically teaches everything you need to know about HVAC systems and how to sequence them. So HVAC systems, how to sequence them, that's all taught in our control sequence fundamentals course. I've seen this time and time again. IT folks come through this course and they leave understanding how HVAC systems work. Why is that the case? Because of how we teach in that course. A lot of folks who are trying to teach HVAC to IT folks are trying to teach them like they're mechanics. They don't think like mechanics. They just don't. Mechanics are very hands-on, type tactile learners, whereas IT folks tend to be very visual learners. So the way in which you teach has to be different. So that is a con, because a lot of IT folks have this perception that they can't learn HVAC, when in reality, most of the time, it's actually that the person teaching HVAC to the IT folks does not know how to communicate to them in a way that they are able to understand. So how do you get hired? Well, once again, you're running in a lot of cases to that salary issue, right? Especially in the IT realm, where depending on your skill set, you can easily be in six figures. There's a lot of IT folks who want to transfer. Here's what I recommend here. 1, getting hired on as the IT person for a BAS company, especially a BAS company that's focused on analytics, focused on remote operation, or is doing technical integration. This is a very easy role to step into with your IT knowledge. You come in as the person who's going to be setting up the server, the Amazon Web Services, the Azure, the remote connections, the VPNs. You're the person doing that on every project, and you will quickly find yourself by osmosis learning the BAS side as well. Then there's the gradual side, which is instead of just doing a lateral, which is getting hired as an IT person and doing a lateral, the gradual side is where you're slowly taking on abilities while going and still being that IT person. Basically the same thing as lateral, just a longer time period. And then finally, there's the same method, right? Which is just after hours aggressively apply and get hired. So then it brings us to the group I'm most passionate about, which is just us common folks. That's myself. I had a little bit of mechanical knowledge coming out of the military, having worked on missile systems, but not really. If I'm honest with you, it just taught me how to read one-lines. The reality is there's so many folks who have mechanical capabilities, who have an analytical mind that can step into these roles, but they never get them. I mean, for the longest time, all I had was a business degree. And that business degree got me to the point where I was the foremost expert on how to retrofit BAS systems and get them ready for analytics. I could go into any site and look at anybody's system, figure out how we were going to grab data, how we were going to pull the data out. And I could also understand the mechanical systems and how we wanted to optimize those. How did I learn all this? Well, I did the hard work. I went and got a CEM. I did a ton of after hours reading the Honeywell Gray Manual until I literally could see it with my eyes closed. There are a lot of common folks out there who have the technical capacity. I was tempted to say capability, but it's not developed yet, so it's not capability, but capacity to do the work. The biggest con is, honestly, it's a risk. It is a big risk to hire someone who has no mechanical background or no IT background. Now, there's also a pro to these people. Oftentimes, these folks are at the lower end of the salary range, so you're able to hire them onto more of a low-end, low-salary position. And they're able to accept that lower salary and work their way up. That's kind of where I came in. But the cons are that you have to be willing to take that risk. And if you are an applicant, you have to be able to convince the person to take that risk on you. So how do you do that? One way is you show an investment into this field. Listening to our podcast like you're doing right now is a good investment. It will help you be conversational. Going and picking up a controller off eBay and working on that, or picking it up through a supply house. Going and paying for our courses, or going to a local community college if they have a controls program and going through their courses. Those are all good investments to show you are interested in this industry and you are striving to grow. Because the reality is, most people will not take any of those steps. So once again, it's just doing a little bit more than everyone else is doing, and you will really exceed what everyone else is doing. This is the most untapped field, in my opinion, once we tap out the IT roles, which I think, from what I'm seeing, about 5 to 10% of IT folks would be willing to transition. A good chunk of tradespeople would be willing to transition. But once we've went and grabbed from those two buckets, we still have a massive shortage. And it's this common unskilled labor that we're going to be tapping on and developing into the next generation of BAS. I believe that this is our biggest bucket of talent that we are not properly utilizing. And I mean, you can get into all sorts of issues, the elimination of trade within the public school system and all that. But the reality is that these common folks are a untapped pool of talent that we need to be thinking about. So just to real quickly recap on this week's episode. First off, all you got to do is outwork everyone else. I know it seems really simple for me to say that, but the reality is most people will not outwork everyone else. They will give up, and all you have to do is not give up when everyone else is giving up. The key skills required to get into this field are not that challenging. You can learn them within a month or two. A lot of people will tell you you can't. They'll say, oh, you need to be in for 2-3 years. The reality is you can learn most of what you need to learn with dedicated focus within a month or two for an entry-level role before I start getting all these people emailing me and messaging me about, no, you can't. It took me 5 years. Well, I'm talking about an entry-level role. Let me repeat that. Entry-level role. Make sure you pay attention to those words. But as I mentioned, once you've got that entry-level role, it is your hard work and dedication that will get you promoted faster than everyone else and help you move into the more complex roles. Now, in our next episode, we are going to be talking about something we haven't ever talked about on the podcast, and that is, okay, you're in a role. How do you move up? How do you develop those next level skills? What are those next level skills? I'm going to talk about what's happening in the industry right now. We're going to talk about analytics. We're going to talk about IP controls. We're going to talk about all the different changes we're seeing and what skills those require and how you can go about developing those skills, where you can go, how you can develop those skills, and just kind of what you need to be thinking about for the next 5-10 years in your career and how you can go and get ahead of that. That way, when those positions open up for someone who has a hybrid knowledge of IT and BAS and can implement analytics and can set up cloud systems, and they're saying, hey, we're paying $120,000 a year for someone who could do this, you're already ahead of that curve and you're sitting there ready for those kind of roles to open up for you. So that being said, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate you all being here, more than you know. Thanks so much. All the kind words I get from you all. All I ask is if you found this podcast valuable, you go to iTunes, leave us a review, hopefully a 5-star rating. That would be awesome. That just helps us spread the word of this podcast. And with that being said, everything I mentioned is available at buildingautomationmonthly.com/153. There you can find information about our online programs. You can find access to our free programs. You can find our past podcast episodes, some of our guides, and you can also find the link to our BAS or our Building Automation Systems A to Z online program that I mentioned earlier in this episode. Thanks so much, and I will see you in next week's episode. Take care.